Hi, welcome to the ZP vlog and podcast. So we do this vlog and podcast. We try to do it every Sunday at 8 a.m. London time, and it's really just a wrap up on the news for this week. So let me jump into it and give a sort of, as I say, a summary of the things that have happened in ZP this week. So one of the first things that we reported on was as part of a large newsletter that we sent out this week. As part of that, we actually did sort of do a big discussion about the range of electrodes that we have at ZP. So, it's clear. We have the graphene electrodes, these carbon electrodes, these gold electrodes, and these platinum electrodes. And obviously, I think there's two distinguishing factors here. There's really the quality and the cost. I think the quality is very high, and I think the cost is very low, and therefore, by definition, the value is very good. If we consider quality divided by cost equals value, and yeah, as I say, we do have the graphene, the carbon, the gold, and the platinum, and I think the graphene electrodes, whether you choose to use a graphene or not, is almost like a preference. It's a sort of interest at the moment in the R&D space, but it's not necessarily I don't think in the sensor world gives you much of an advantage, but I can see it being an advantage maybe in other electrochemical domains, for example, batteries, etc. But the graphene electrode that we do have, it's super competitive, if not extremely aggressively competitive in terms of its cost. We're selling a sort of packs of 200 for like 390 euros. I don't want to overplay it, but it's kind of ridiculous how low cost that graphene electrode actually is. And then obviously we have the carbon, and that's really is a high value product because we say it a lot at ZP, but we are the biggest users of these electrodes, and so the quality is kind of baked in for us because we need these electrodes to make all of our sensors upon them. To make our chili sensors upon them, etc. So the carbon electrode is super critical to us in terms of cost and its performance. And then we obviously have the gold and the platinum, which are more recent introductions. So we did put a bit of a note out there this week. Now, I just said it, but we did do a large newsletter this week where we reached out to, all the ZP, if I can call it the ZP community, at least the ZP contacts, and we talked about the Scandinavia Sensor Summit. This is a conference that we are holding in September, and it really covers all things sensor and digitization. I think we kind of straplined it for sort of digitization for a sustainable future. But what sustainable, obviously, is human endeavor going on in such a way that the planet can support it. And we always think, if you can't measure it, then you can't control it, and you certainly can't improve it. So measuring things with sensors, digitizing the data so that it kind of goes into the cloud, turning that then into information is really part of what ZP is about and what that conference is about. So we did put out about that. In the newsletter, we covered the graphene, gold, and platinum electrodes. We also mentioned that, of course, we're going to do of course, once a month we're doing Food Sense webinars, and what that means is that anyone who's kind of interested in Food Sense and seeing a live demo and having a bit of a presentation on Food Sense can attend these monthly webinars. And there's one at 9 a.m. UK time and one at 4 p.m. UK time. And what that means is then we're able to cover Asia, and we're also able to cover Europe, and we're able to cover the US by using those two different slots. And in that workshop, we definitely do. I do some speaking. We talk about the technical and the history on the chili sensor. The fact is the chili sensor came out of Oxford University, so we do talk about that, and then we actually do at least 3 live demos. So you can see. It's not just a bunch of talking heads. There's actually some real value, I would say, in those talking in demos, I would say. Something else that we're doing, which is kind of new, is we also have our screen printing workshops. We do have lots of people who come to us and say, I want custom electrodes, custom pastes, custom inks, custom designs. And then you kind of realize, well, actually, what we need to do here is have a workshop, because I realize that what people need is sort of training in this subject before they can really ask for customization. So that's something that we're doing. Something else that's happening as well is we do have something called Vault Deposit. Vault Deposit is, I think, the world's only robotic potentiostat system. So it has roles both in R&D and in manufacturing. But it is a unique sort of system, and we can do things like sort of electrodeposition, electroplating, electropolymerization. But we can sort of do it, if I can say on scale, we can sort of treat something like, and I just mute that, we could treat something like 40 electrodes at a time, because we have this kind of carrier PCB where we can populate all these SPEs, all these screen printed electrodes into it. We put that onto the robot bed, and then the robot can move it around and sort of bring it into solutions and do electropolymerizations upon it. So we do have the Vault Deposit, if I can say, and very useful for R&D, very useful for manufacturing. We also then have a 2 or 3 years ago, we ended up purchasing the assets of a company called Sarissa. Sarissa makes micro electrodes or micro biosensors for neuroscience applications. Also, we are having a workshop on neuroscience biosensing, and that'll be happening in September in conjunction with Warwick University. Something that we're really proud of, and we really want to move forward, is total antioxidative status, TAS sensing. You can use this to kind of monitor the antioxidative position, if I can put it that, of animals and humans. And this is something that we've actually put a lot of effort in, so we're very keen to sort of move forward that TAS sensor. Something else that we're also very keen on is Sense It All. Sense It All is really the ZP platform, where at ZP we describe ourselves as being kind of sensor to API, application program interface. So the idea is you have a sensor, you have electronics, which we have. So we have sensors, we have electronics, we have apps, and then we're able to quickly change the app to be specific to that sensor, and then we're able to send the data to the cloud. And we have this technology stack, and it's incredibly robust these days, and people are having a really good experience on it. So I'm really happy with essentially the feedback that we're having on that. And then the last thing that we highlighted in our in our newsletter this week was obviously our workshops. I've mentioned at least one type of webinar for Food Sense this week. I've mentioned actually a workshop on neuroscience and a workshop on screen printed electrodes, and of course we carry on having our workshop on wearables and CGMs, continuous glucose monitoring, and generally in biosensing as well. So a lot of workshops on these days. I put in a quick note out there this week about sample to sensor versus sensor to sample. This is just really a sort of discussion about that you can have, I mean, the name says it really, you can have a sensor which you put in the sample, and I've sort of described that as sensor to sample, but you can have a sensor where you bring the sample to the sensor, clearly sample to sensor. And there's pros and cons in doing either, actually, and whether you do one or the other really depends on the application. But if we just say, you know, at ZP we like to get into the design phase pretty early on and sort of contribute intellectually, even just answering that quite simple question. We did do our ZP Developer Zone webinar on, we are going to do our ZP Developer Zone webinar on the 1st of June. And I realized that on the 1st of June, every week, if people have questions of ZP, you know, we like to put the questions out there. We like to answer the questions. The nice thing about doing the webinar is if somebody has a question, we will answer it in the webinar, and of course the webinar then is recorded, and so you have a sort of, you know, a video answer, that you can watch, rewind, and dig into a little bit more, think about a little bit more. I think that's just so much more impactful than just a line in an email, etc. So that's how we like to do technical questions that come into ZP during the week. And then the last thing is, it feels like we've been a bit light on the ZP news this week. We've obviously been, as always, super busy, if I can put it that way. But we were giving a talk this week at MEMS and Sensors Technical Congress, the MSTC 2023 that was hosted at MIT in Boston. And so we were involved in speaking at that conference, and that went, let's say, really well. So it's been a busy week, lots of news as always going out. I would say if you've got technical questions of ZP, reach out to us. You will find those technical questions answered in our weekly webinar. And if you just generally have sort of commercial interest, don't hesitate to reach out to us at ZP as well. So I'll wrap it up for this week. Don't forget, we do have our ZP Developer Zone webinar every Thursday, 8 a.m. London time. And don't forget, there's a vlog and podcast every Sunday at approximately 8 a.m. London time. So I will finish with that. But if you have any questions, ZP, again, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, thanks very much.